Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Mums Club podcast, your go-to solution for baby and child sleep issues. Thank you so much for tuning in. This podcast is designed to help tired mums with their sleep struggles. I am your host, Keri Rock. I am a child sleep consultant, holistic health coach, business owner, but most importantly, I'm a mum of 2 toddlers. And having been a fellow sleep-deprived mum, I know just how challenging it can be to function on little sleep and how it can affect every aspect of our lives. So let's dive into today's episode, which is all around early rising. Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Mums Club podcast. I'm your host, Keri Rock, and today we're going to dive into a topic that's got many of you watching the sunrise with your little ones, early rising. So let's demystify it and arm you with strategies to encourage those precious hours of morning sleep. Because if you're anything like me, a wake up before 6 o'clock in the morning feels something akin to torture and just very unfair. So, first off, we'll start by unwrapping the science of sleep. Sleep really isn't as simple as closing our eyes and zoning out. It's a complex dance of hormones and cycles, all choreographed by a conductor known as the circadian rhythm. There are several stages of sleep, but the most crucial for our discussion today are REM and deep sleep. Now, REM is the dream stage, and deep sleep is when the body does the majority of its growth and restoration. Both of these stages are vital for our little one's development. But the hormones that we're most interested in are melatonin, which signals the body it's time for sleep, and cortisol, which nudges us awake. Now, when everything's working well, melatonin levels rise in the evening, peak around midnight, and drop off somewhere towards early morning. Whilst cortisol, on the other hand, does the opposite, reaching its peak in the early morning. The circadian rhythm is your body's internal clock that operates on a roughly 24-hour cycle, and this influencing when we feel alert or sleepy, and it's significantly impacted by light and darkness, which is why naturally we feel tired when it gets dark and awake when it's light, which can cause quite a few problems in these summer months when it gets light very, very early and dark very, very late. So, why do some kids act like they're training for a career in dairy farming and waking up at the crack of dawn? Often it's because their sleep wake cycle or their circadian rhythm is out of sync with the day night cycle. Now, this can happen due to inconsistent bedtimes, late naps, or even a lack of exposure to morning light. And sometimes it can come down to the quality of sleep. So, if your child isn't reaching enough deep sleep, possibly due to illness or teething, sleep apnea, or even sleep associations that are causing them to wake multiple times, they might wake up early. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the sleep environment. Now, this is something I dove into in last week's episode, but an optimum sleep environment is dark, it's cool, and it's quiet. Now, why are those so key? Because darkness encourages the production of melatonin, whilst cooler temperatures make it easier for our bodies to maintain the lower temperature it prefers for sleep. Now, did you know that even a little bit of light can affect melatonin levels? It's true, and it can cause an already alert child to rouse earlier than necessary. So, if you can, I really highly advise that you invest in some great quality blackout curtains or blinds for your child's room, as even a sliver of light coming in the morning can cause the reduction in that melatonin, the rise in cortisol, and hey presto, you have a wide awake child at 5:30 in the morning. Now, when I say a dark room, again, I know I did cover this last week, but let's have a look at that again quickly. I do mean pretty much pitch black. 10 out of 10 black if you can do that. 8 out of 10 is, also okay. And again, let's look at the hand test. So if you go into your child's room, you close the blinds, close the door, and everything else, put your hand in front of your face. If you can still see it clearly, that room is not dark enough. Now, also have a look at noise because children can be really, really sensitive to sound, which is why white noise can be so effective, but again, if you're using white noise, it needs to be consistent all night, just to drown out some of that morning, the natural environmental noise that might happen. Could be a boiler noise, it could be road noise, it could just be the birds. I know around by me we have seagulls. They are a complete pain because they are so noisy, and they like to sit on our roof, and they kick off anytime from 5 o'clock in the morning. And it can be really difficult to keep my little ones asleep through that noise. But white noise can be really effective in limiting some of that. So, armed with this understanding, let's discuss how to tackle early rising. Now, I will say this many times, consistency is key. Aim for a regular bedtime and wake up time, even on weekends. I know it's tempting to want to lie in on the weekend. We all do. It's only natural. But letting our kids stay up a bit later on the weekend and then expecting them to actually sleep later in the morning really doesn't work. So do try to keep their schedule regular during the week and on weekends, as this really helps to anchor your child's circadian rhythm to the desired schedule. Now, next, let's pay attention to naps. Too much or too little daytime sleep can lead to early rising. So be sure to follow age appropriate nap schedules and wake windows. So if your little one's nap is too early due to their early wake up, this could actually be reinforcing the early rising. So try to push that first nap to after 8, ideally closer to 8:39. So try to keep their schedule as if they had woken up at 6 rather than actually shifting everything that much earlier. Because if you found yourself shifting the entire day earlier to accommodate this early rising, it can quickly become their schedule. So to try and change that, you can try shifting the nap later by about 15 minutes per day. So to where you need it to be. I would also ensure they're not getting too much daytime sleep for their age and their needs. It is a myth that all babies sleep 12 hours overnight. For some, it sits between 10 to 12 hours. So, say bedtime's too early and they're waking happily after 10 and a half hours, that could just be your child's natural sleep schedule. So, it might be worth adjusting bedtime to reflect that. But on the other hand, that being said, an overtired child can also wake early. So the important part is to check the age appropriate wake windows, which we discussed in last week's episode, and ensure the right schedule for your little one. Now, another important factor is hunger. If your child is used to having a feed in the early hours, they might naturally wake up out of habit. So slowly try to adjust feed times to discourage this where possible. Obviously, again, depending on age and if appropriate. Or if you find that dinner is quite early, it might help to consider a snack before bedtime. There are a number of foods that support the production of melatonin and therefore sleep. I actually have a free ebook that talk about quite a few of these and give some snack suggestions. And you can download that from my Instagram account on at my.sleeping.grace. Or you can go to my free Facebook group for all things sleep support called the Sleepy Mums Club. And we'd love to have you in there. Now, let's talk about a technique that might raise your eyebrows, the wake to sleep method. Now, this involves lightly waking your child about an hour before their usual wake up time. Now, for some, it can help to do it around 3 o'clock in the morning if they're waking from 4 onwards. If the standard wake up is actually around 5:30, then you could probably do it from 4:30. But the real important part is, and I know it does sound completely counterintuitive, but it really just needs to be a gentle nudge. It's just so that we can try and reset your little one's internal body clock and push that wake up time a bit later. For some little ones, even opening their door and going in there is enough for them to have a little shift around. For others, just gently stroking their face or something soft like that might be enough. Just, you want a little wriggle, a bit of acknowledgement that they've had a bit of a disruption, but not enough that they're actually waking up. But even with these strategies, it's possible you'll encounter some stumbling blocks. So let's talk about how to handle some of those. Try to resist the urge to let your child stay in bed for extended periods if they're awake, especially during the day. So it might just be really handy, to pop them in their cot, let them have a play. And for little ones who aren't familiar with their cot and you're trying to get them used to that environment, that's great. But for the sake of this conversation, you're trying to avoid them seeing it as a play space and more as a sleeping space, as it can lead to an association of the bed with wakefulness instead of sleep. Now, if your child wakes up early, it's okay to keep them in their room until it's time to start the day. So you can consider using a toddler clock that changes color at the okay to wake time to help them understand. So if they're waking at 5:30, it is absolutely okay to keep them in their room until 6 o'clock. That is, it's not a problem. It actually can be quite good for them to get used to being happy in their own space and also just ensuring that it's not massively impacting you too. And for some little ones, it could just be that because you're not going into them immediately and engaging with them and starting their day at that time, they get the hint that actually this isn't wake up time and they do start sleeping longer. Now, in the instances where you have tried to treat the early morning wake up as a night waking, which is what I advise when I'm working with families, then what you would do, first of all, is treat that as a night waking and try and get them to resettle. If it's getting past 5 o'clock in the morning and you can see that there is absolutely no ways that they are going to be going back to sleep, then do what we call dramatic wake up. Walk out the room, leave it 1, 2 minutes, and go back in daytime mode. So you go in there as opposed to nighttime mode where you're trying to resettle them and you're being really bland and really boring and really quiet and subdued and all of those sorts of things to try and indicate to them that it's still sleepy time and actually it's not wake up time. With dramatic wake up, you walk out the room and you go back in, and I know you might not feel it, but you try to show a completely different vibe. So you walk in there, you can open the curtains, be a bit more bright and breezy. So you really show them the difference between nighttime mode and when it should be still sleeping time, and then daytime mode, because that can really help them also understand. Now, as with all of these things, patience and consistency are your best friends here. So remember, it might generally take a few weeks to see changes. Now, I know we've covered a lot today, but you're really not alone in this journey. Early rising is such a common issue that many parents face, but with a little bit of knowledge and a lot of patience, it can be tackled. So remember, understand your child's sleep cycle and the role of sleep hormones, create an optimal sleep environment, and maintain a consistent routine. And don't be afraid to try the wake to sleep method. That's it for today's episode of the Sleepy Mums Club. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember, every child is unique, and finding what works best for your child and your family is key. So here's to better sleep and happier mornings for everyone.